Hi, everyone. Welcome back to Rough Rider, where every week we talk writing, self-publishing, and making it as an author. We're continuing this author series today, or series of interviews, which I still have to think of a name for. But today I've got Matthew Arnold Stern with me, who is both a writer and a speaker. So thank you for being here, Matthew. I really appreciate you coming on.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be with you today.
Yeah, so I think it'll be cool to hear kind of your history with writing. I was looking through your bio that you have on your website, so everyone, I will put a link to his website as well as all of his books in the description for this. But I saw that your career path actually was in tech companies first, and then it looks like you really started publishing novels fairly recently, I guess. Like your novel Amiga was in 2019, and then
Mhm.
The Remainders is 2021. So a lot of your career was tech related before you really started putting out books like this. So I think it'll be cool to hear about that. So I guess to start off, do you want to just tell me or tell everyone a little bit about yourself and kind of where you got your start?
Certainly. My interest in writing started way back in high school. I was going through typical teenage stuff, and I thought writing it down in a journal was a great way of expressing my feelings. And my English teacher, Darlene Loyler, read my writing and said, you have a lot of promise as a writer. And she encouraged me to develop those skills. And I got involved with the creative writing magazine, with the school newspaper. I also was on a school paper when I was in college. But one of the challenges that come with wanting to be a writer is how do you turn it into a living? I don't want to be the person with the English degree and saying, "Do you want fries with that?" Although I did work at a Carl's Jr. through college. So I discovered technical writing. I worked for a small Commodore 64 software company in the San Fernando Valley where I grew up. And that's how I merged my love for computers with my love for writing. And I started off writing everything that needed to be done from press releases to user manuals. And I was able to establish a career in technical writing. It's something I've been doing for 40 years. It eventually got me to move down to Orange County, where I live today. This is where I met my wife, and I've been with my current employer for it's coming up 21 years now. So I always love the technical challenges that come with technical writing. But of course, being a novelist is something that I always wanted to do. And I self-published my first two novels, starting with Offline in 2005 and then Doria in 2011. And they were good for experiences. They didn't get a whole lot of buyers, but I really wanted to be accepted by a publisher. And so I found Black Rose Writing, which is a small press in Texas. And they published my two recent novels that you mentioned, Amiga and The Remainders.
Cool. So
And I
you've
also had,
had kind of experience with both routes of getting a book out there then. So you would kind of
yes,
you've had an experience that maybe a lot of the people who watch these videos of mine who've like kind of just done self-publishing, like they might not really know a whole lot about that. So I'd be interested in kind of hearing what your experience was with both and kind of what you liked better about one over the other. But oh, keep going. I
yeah.
have a tendency to interrupt, so I
No, that's
apologize in
that's no, that's
advance.
perfectly fine because
Yeah.
what I'm going to talk about next actually leads into where you've just talked about, which is another book that I self-published, which is Mastering Table Topics, which is the it's a guide on public speaking, impromptu public speaking, and it's actually been my most successful book. It's nonfiction, which is an easier market to sell to.
Mhm.
And when it comes to self-publishing versus going with a small press or finding an agent and going with a major publisher, a lot of it depends on the type of book that you're writing. Like the Table Topics book is great as as a self-published book because it is a niche market. It's something that most take on. And when you self-publish, you have full creative control. Of course, you can publish whatever you choose to write. You also have to, you can do your own covers, you can set your own pricing, you can get your own ISBN, so you do have complete control. But you also have to understand that when you self-publish, you have to take on all the responsibilities of any publisher. So things like editing and book design and marketing and distribution, those all fall on your shoulders. And there are certain companies that help with this, like I use Lulu. I've been using that since 2005, and they handle the distribution. They also handle ISBNs. So if you don't want to go through the cost of and having to maintain ISBNs, that's an option for you, although they control the ISBNs. But
I'm
one
glad
thing,
you mentioned that, by the way, because
yes,
I feel like a lot of people will get into self-publishing because they saw maybe a YouTube video or something that made it out like self-publishing is this get rich quick scheme where it's like you can just, oh, you could write whatever you want, you could put it out, and then like that's it, you're gonna make tons of money like overnight, and that there's no work involved. And I've seen videos like that and they kind of drive me crazy because I just
yeah,
feel like it's really misleading to tell people that like you will have to put a lot of work into it, and there may even be like financial investment that you need to put into it as well that not everyone is really considering. So I just feel like everything you just said is so realistic, and I really want people to hear that,
yeah,
because there's a lot of gimmicky things online, like in gimmicky videos that are going to try to convince you that this could be a very easy journey and that it requires almost nothing out of you and that you can then become a millionaire overnight. And that's just not the case. Like there's so many benefits I feel to self-publishing, but at the same time, like it comes with risk. Like there's always risk involved with that. So thank you for saying that, because it's just I don't know if people really mention that enough. So yeah, that's just something I really think that listeners should understand about self-publishing.
absolutely. And I think another aspect of the self-publishing route is you also have to be your own acquisitions editor, which means you have to take a look at your manuscripts and decide, is this something that is really publishable? Because keep in mind that even though we like to talk about writing as a community rather than a competition, you are having to jockey for shelf space and attention with books that are published by major publishers that have invested a lot of money and have full-time staffs. And if you're going to produce something that people will want to buy and read, then you're going to have to put in the same levels of commitment and effort as you are going to have it published by a major publisher. So I
Mhm.
think it's not like, because I do remember in the early days in self-publishing, this is like 2000, 2002, the idea that you can write whatever you want and get it published, and people had really unrealistic expectations that I think it soured a lot of people, because I think people came to realize that no, you have to write quality work, you have to have it edited, you have to put in, either pay to get cover art or buy clip art and be able to license it. You do have to put in the effort to market it. So there's a lot of work that goes into publishing. And the other thing that I found that's true, going with a small press versus trying to do it on my own, is that with a small press, it opens doors that you don't get as a self-published author. That there are some, there are reviewers and influencers who do give preference to a book published by a publisher rather than somebody who self-publishes their work, because there's so much content now with generative AI. There are people who just think, well, I could just run a story idea through ChatGPT and slap a cover on it, and I have a book that I could sell. And AI is its own discussion. I can see as a technology person the pros and cons, but people want quality writing, and you need to, and I think there is a certain benefit of going through the submission and approval and editing and publication process with a press, whether it's a small press or if you go through an agent and get a major publisher, that you might not get if you self-publish. And certainly your out of pocket would probably be less if you try to go with a press
Mhm.
than trying to do it on your own.
So can I ask you, this is like, because I'm curious about this. So you self-published your first book in 2005, you said. So how was self-publishing different back then from how it is now? Like, were there a lot, I would imagine there were a lot less resources for people at the time if you were trying to do it. I don't even know back then how because was I in high, I was in high school at the time. And I was writing stories like on the side, and I too, like just like you, had like a one English teacher who was the one who really kind of put that idea into me
Yeah,
that I could maybe have a future with this. And it's amazing how that one person will kind of stick with you forever. Like I
absolutely.
still, my mom is a teacher, and I always think like, it must be cool to have a career where I don't even know if they realize how much of a difference they can make for like one kid. Like, because to them maybe they were just saying it and then like never thought about it again. But to me, I'm like, yeah, that like really shaped the path that I decided to take later down, like down the line as I got older. But I wasn't doing anything with self-publishing at the time, so I don't really know kind of what the like was the did you was KDP a thing? Was it something some other platform that you did it through? Like, how did it work? And then how does that differ from kind of what people can expect now in terms of what is available for self-publishing?
Well, certainly the expectations were not as high. There was still the idea that we could just upload a manuscript and have it and put it posted on Amazon and people would buy it. So I think people are a lot more aware today of the amount of work that's required to produce quality books, whether you self-publish them or go with a publisher. And so that aspect of it is different. And I think I don't remember if there was, I don't remember what KDP was called, but Amazon did have something like that.
Mhm.
And then there was still Lightning Source and Ingram Spark. So again, it's a matter of what was attractive about Lulu at the time was that a lot of things were included. It included ISBNs and included bookstore distribution. So you could write a book and talk to your local Barnes and Noble or other bookstore and convince them to carry your book. And in fact, our local Barnes and Noble did carry my original self-published books.
That's
And
great.
again, and I think one of the issues that come in, and this is again one of those differences between self-publishing and going with a publisher, is the question about returnability, because bookstores will not consider books to include in their bookstores unless they have a returnability you know feature. So that's something that people need to think about. And I think the other thing, it does seem that the book landscape has changed a lot since 2005, because back then Barnes and Noble was really big. We still had Borders. We still were dominated by the major change. Costco had a huge table for books and sold a lot of different titles. But now we're down to like a few major chains. There's still Barnes and Noble is still hanging on, and actually they've been doing a lot of changes recently, uh, going with smaller stores, and also maybe a lot more space, a lot fewer titles. There's a huge explosion of indie bookstores. I've noticed a lot of indie bookstores opening, certainly in the past few years. And these bookstores really do cater to indie authors and local writers. So, and they have different book events, and they like to have writers participate. So that that's also a major change in the in the book marketing world right now.
Well, like I feel like that's probably every self-publishing author's dream is to actually see their book in a physical bookstore. So to actually have, even if it's just the local Barnes and Noble carry that, that must be a great feeling to see, being able to see that. And what you said is absolutely true, that the returnability of your book is going to dictate whether or not the physical bookstore is even going to consider it. So
Yeah,
that's something I don't think a lot of people think about either. Just like the time and like work investment into self-publishing, I don't know if everyone considers. That's another thing, because when you use a print on demand company like Ingram Spark or Lulu, or I think Draft for Digital is one, or KDP, whatever someone's using, you'll see, when you go to set up an account and it has all of these things that it's going to say about like, oh, what we can do for you and all the services we offer, you're going to see stuff saying like, get your book into brick and mortar bookstores. And that sounds great, but I think that some people may think that just by printing your book on demand through this company, that means it's absolutely going to get into a bookstore, but it's not necessarily the case, if it's not able to be returned. And then I think that those bookstores have to like specifically request
right,
stock of your books, right? So if there's no interest being expressed in it, then they're not likely to actually request that. It doesn't just get automatically sent out to Barnes and Noble all over
right.
the place. So I think that's a good thing for people to know. So that leads me, actually, since we're talking about self-publishing and creating kind of a demand for your book that might get a bookstore to pick it up. You were a finalist for literary fiction in the 2023, it was Incipient Awards, Incipient.
Yes,
So I my book Devils and Sunday Hats, which after reading reading the descriptions of your books, I was like, oh, I actually think we'd have some stuff
yeah,
in common with that, because that's a coming of age story, and then the remainder is I think you classified it as a coming of age story as well.
yes.
But with that, I was a finalist for the National Indie Excellence Award. So I'm curious, what usually when you get that status as like a finalist or a winner or anything, like if you're recognized in a contest like that, then they give you the opportunity to use, you can obviously state that publicly that you were, and then they might give you like a little medal or like a graphic that you can put onto your book saying, I was a finalist or I was a winner. So did you, other than, it's awesome to be able to say that you were a finalist, did you see that it made any like any significant difference in like the sellability of your book? And the reason I'm asking that is because I'm going to be putting out a video soon about indie book contest. It's going to be on YouTube. I think it's scheduled for like next week. But and I was listening, kind of going through some of the top indie book contests that you can find that are open for, just like general submissions of self-published books. And I'm talking about kind of what the benefits of that might be. And given that you typically have to spend, you have to pay an entry fee that sometimes can be kind of steep.
Right.
And like, do you feel that contests like that are something that indie authors should like absolutely go for and try to submit their books to? Or do you feel like, it's a cool thing to have, but maybe won't necessarily impact things too much?
Well, it's like everything else. It's the cool thing. It's a cool thing to have, and certainly getting awarded for your writing is always a wonderful feeling. And sometimes it does help to be able to put that in your marketing material. I think probably one of the things that people mostly look for in choosing books are reviews, and Amazon reviews in particular, because people do take a look at those. And there's also things that happen with the Amazon algorithm when you reach certain numbers of reviews, that it gets pushed more in people's feeds. So in many respects, the Amazon review is, I think, probably the most crucial thing in being able to get people's honest opinions about books. I know that Amazon is very particular that they look for, first of all, verified purchases. There are times when you can send copies of reviews to people like ARCs and stuff like that, although they have to indicate that a copy of the book was provided by the author, which could certainly affect people's opinion about the reviews. So I think that reviews are probably the most important thing that you can do. And one other thing that's a difference between self-published versus getting your book published is that when you're with a publisher, you often, or have a published book like that, that you often get access to contests that are not available to self-published authors. And in some cases, the publisher will either give you a discount or cover the cost of your entry fee. So that's something to consider. But I think mostly getting the reviews are probably the most important part of your marketing.
I feel like reviews are always a really tough thing for people to try to even get a small number of them when people don't know who you are as an author. You know, you're a first time author and people have never heard your name before. Like that's something that I try to put out these videos giving advice about various things with either like self-publishing or just writing in general, but I really still have no advice for anyone when it comes to getting reviews for your book. I don't know if you have any input or any suggestions, but I feel like I'm always at a loss for that. I found that it's sometimes even hard to get people who are close to you in your personal life to even do it. So the idea of getting strangers to write one is even more difficult, in my opinion, or it can be. So I don't know. Do you have any? Totally fine if you don't, because God knows I don't have any answers. But do you have any like suggestions maybe for people who are struggling with trying to get any like maybe they've got like one or two reviews but just can't get people to write them. And I'm not saying like they're soliciting for them necessarily, but like even if they're selling their books and readers are just not leaving reviews after, do you think there's anything that maybe people could do to try to help that situation a little bit?
Well, I know that sometimes it's just a matter of asking, just saying that, using your social media channels and say, hey, if you've read my book and you enjoy it, then please do leave a review. It helps. And actually, one of my friends of mine, our publisher had a thing where our books were could access certain Amazon ads if they reached a certain number of reviews. And this one friend of mine was really close, just got out on his social media channels and say, hey, this publisher is offering me a great opportunity if I can get to 1,000 reviews. If you've read my book and you enjoyed it, please post a review. And he did hit that number. So it's just a matter of asking, saying, hey, this really helps. If you enjoy the book, please share it. And I think, and certainly when you listen to YouTube channels, everybody says, please like and subscribe. And it's sort of like the same thing. You don't want to be heavy-handed about it, but just reminding people every so often and encouraging them to, hey, leave a review, let people know what you think.
Mm-hmm.
And encouraging honest reviews. I think that we've seen too many cases where people have flipped out about even getting 4-star reviews. And and let's face it, we're also going to get 1-star reviews. And the thing that
Mhm.
I always say is, if you don't have any 1-star reviews, you don't have enough reviews. So
I agree
even
with
with
that
one,
entirely.
yes,
I feel like it looks strange if your book is universally loved by everyone and it's just all 5-star reviews. If I see that, I look at that and I'm kind of like, are these real? Like I'm not sure because everyone has different tastes a book's not always going to appeal to every single person. So I agree with you there. About having kind of a mix of obviously you want to shoot for the best ones possible, but
right,
having a handful of bad ones is not necessarily going to destroy your chances of it being successful. Um, so I want to give you a chance to talk about your books. We're talking
hmm
about reviews, we're talking about getting the books out there, but I want to hear a little bit about your books. So, um, there was one thing I thought before I let you get to actually describing them, if you'd like to, is so offline a novel you would publish like quite a bit earlier than the other two, Amiga and The Remainders, and then your
yeah,
nonfiction book. So it it looks like you have multiple books where it's really there's a female lead, like you're
yeah,
writing from a feminine perspective. So I've written female characters too, like it's not no problem there, but um for you, like I feel like people make everything into an identity thing now, and that's just very, very common. So, and there are people, I was just talking about this, that there's people who feel like they'll go on Reddit or they'll go on like social media who are kind of small authors, and they're asking, am I allowed to write this? And asking questions like that, which I don't personally, I'm kind of like, it bothers me that they're even socially driven to ask those questions in the first place. Asking, and is it okay if I write from the perspective of someone that I am not, which is, it's just a bizarre kind of take to me. But, you know, for you, like, does it, like, I feel like the character, their gender or whatever group they're part of, however you want to classify them socially or, sexually or whatever, doesn't really matter. I feel like you could tell a story from a person's point of view regardless. Like, so, I like writing people who are not me. That's it's
yeah.
you know, so so I like that you were writing from the perspective of someone that maybe someone might not expect that
Mhm.
you would be focusing on. So, can you tell me a little bit about Amiga? I'd like to hear about that one first, if you could, if you
Okay.
want to.
Well, Amiga is an example of being willing to get into somebody else's head, because one of the big changes that I made between my first two novels and these two more recent ones was I shifted to first person narration. And that required me to really get into the head of somebody who, I mean, let's face it, that when you're writing a story, you're not going to be writing a character who's yourself. That would be a self insert. Nobody wants to read that. You want to be able to experience what life is like for somebody who is different from you. And I mean, certainly, if you can write about a shape shifting extraterrestrial from a distant galaxy, you could certainly write about a woman who lives next door. So, Amiga, it's a, it's one of, Amiga demonstrates one of the things that I use in writing called the bone pile, because many times we start a manuscript and it just doesn't go anywhere. And the ideas that I was trying to write in Amiga, I've been struggling with for years. So what I do is, if I have a manuscript that doesn't come together, I put it in my bone pile, sort of like the bone pile they have at junkyards, or where they put all the spare scrap equipment, and you can use those parts for something else. And Amiga came to me where there were like there were certain pieces that were missing, and I was able to find them, and that made the story come together. What Amiga is about, it's about a programmer named Laura, and it talks about the story. It's in a split split single person, where we see her in 1985, 1986, when she's a young programmer. She's trying to get her foot in the door in Silicon Valley. She winds up working for this rather strange startup that works in somebody's house in San Rafael, California, and it's about how she's trying to develop the software program for the original Commodore Amiga computers. And then we see in parallel a story of her in 2016, where she's now middle aged, she has kids, she's married, and she's dealing with problems in her family and in her career. And we see how things that happened to her in 1985 help her find the solutions to the problems that she has today. And part of the fun of Amiga is leaving little clues about things that happened in 1985 that are going to show up later in the story, and vice versa. So that was the real fun part about writing Amiga. And what was the most validating thing when it came to reviews, when I heard from women readers, and the, the character Laura is Hispanic, and one of my reviewers is a Hispanic reviewer, and they really loved the character. They were able to connect with her, and she was very real to them. And that tells me that the story kind of clicks with people.
That's great. And it sounds like, because even just also looking at the description for the remainders, you have a tendency to write, or correct me if I'm wrong, but you have a tendency to write novels that are, it sounds very character driven. Like you really go into that person's just identity and thoughts and just everything. You're really exploring the person. It's not necessarily
Mhm.
all about just kind of like this is the plot line. It could have happened regardless of who the characters were. Like it's very, very focused on kind of delving into all of these issues, and it looks like you're not shying away from things that are a little bit tougher, like the
Mhm.
remainders had, like, you said Amiga has family issues, Laura has family issues, and the remainders, that looks like that is also, there's a lot of it's kind of family tension, and the relationship between a father and his son that is kind of a broken
Mhm.
relationship. So
Yeah.
that's it. Looks like that's kind of like that's your thing. Like you really, like, you probably enjoy doing it, just like I like that. Like Devils and Sunday Hats was a lot of family kind of drama. It was like the relationship of a son with an alcoholic mother. And
Mhm.
it's for me, it was always really, I don't necessarily want to say fun, because the subject matter can be kind of like it can be a little tough, but it's enjoyable for me to really explore kind of the dynamics between two people, and then also just the internal process of both of those individuals. So the remainders is like that as well. So
Mhm.
can you tell us a little bit about that one?
Yes, The Remainders is about a homeless son and his troubled father. That we see Dylan, who's the 18-year-old boy. He just got kicked out of his mom and stepdad's house in an affluent neighborhood in Orange County, and he winds up sleeping in his SUV behind an abandoned theater in Reseda. And he has to get a job at a dollar store. He starts to try to make a life for himself. In the meantime, his father, Oliver, is in a relationship with one of his fellow doctors, and she has two stepkids. And it's about how the two of them have to deal with a lot of the trauma that they went through in their lives. Like certainly Oliver, as a father, had a very troubled upbringing with with mental illness, and with a parent who unalived himself and having to deal with abuse. And Dylan is, just going through a lot of anger and uncertainty about a lot of the problems that he went through. And it's about how these two people needed to deal with their inner trauma before they can reconnect and find each other. And what was interesting about both Amiga and the Remainders was it came both books were written in 2016, where I was going through some really difficult family things, and things were going on in our own family. So it gave me the opportunity to process them through these books that I was writing. And working in first person enables me to really explore characters. These stories do become a lot more character driven. And that again was a departure from my earlier books that were plot driven. And I would find myself writing myself into corners because would develop these characters and I'd get to a point where I'm saying, wait, this character wouldn't do that at this point of view, but they have to do that in order to move the story forward. But I was real with the newer books, I'm more willing to trust my characters, and you just wind them up and see where they go. And they often lead to very interesting places.
I never really thought about so I usually write in third person, and I've never really tried to do first person. I always felt like it was going to be tougher to do that on some level. So I never really tried, but like what you're saying, it does make a lot of sense that when you start writing with like a first person pronoun like that and saying I or my and speaking from their perspective, I feel like you really can kind of get the reader to really see into the person that way. It's almost like they're speaking to the reader as opposed to someone
Mhm.
describing what someone is going through to the
Mhm.
reader. So that's I feel like as a writing tactic, that's a good take on things. And I will ask, so Amiga, I know you cut between the 80s and then the 2000s. So you're depicting both what happened then and then how it affected the present. In the remainders, because I was talking to someone about this the other day, in terms of like how do people use flashbacks? Like, are flashbacks good or flashbacks bad? Well, like do people use them or do they not like to? For the remainders, when you're talking about the characters' past or their family history and things that have happened in the past that were traumatic, do you depict that like largely through flashbacks, or is it like kind of the characters speaking about a memory, or is it kind of revealed through interactions with someone in the present? Like how do you how do you personally like to go into the past when you're trying to depict that?
Well, it's a combination of all of the things. It's a combination of, yes, there are flashbacks, and you see characters recounting things that happened to them. And since it's first person, it's probably a little bit more organic because how many of us sit and think about, okay, this is what happened to me a few years ago, or this experience. So it's a little more organic when you're working with first person. And then there's also hinted things where characters are there's actions that they do or things that they hesitate to do, and then it becomes revealed as the story goes that, okay, these are the reasons why the character acts the way that they do. And one of the fun things about first person, especially when you're doing dual timeline, because this in the remainders, the characters are basically, each of them are telling their stories in parallel. You got Dylan telling about his story being in Reseda and working in the dollar store and sleeping in the SUV, and Oliver going about his days trying to be, his job as a doctor and being in this relationship with that has its own issues. And so it's interesting to see that there is information that one character has that the other character doesn't. And so they don't understand why they feel the way that they do. And eventually at the end, they are able to put the pieces together and say, oh, that is why.
I feel like with things like that, with like chronologies and trying to depict kind of skipping around in time, people can sometimes have a difficult time actually doing. It talked about once, like with even just writing out a timeline for a book. So I want to ask, like when you're writing a story that is kind of hopping around through time, and you want to make sure that you're not losing track of things. Like how do you personally, when you are writing these and planning them out, like what do you do to really keep everything organized in that way? Like now there's like writing software and stuff that you can use where it can auto generate a timeline for you, or you could do just like basically what I do is just a Word document with dates and I just kind
Yeah.
of bullet it out. But like for you, if you're writing a book that's going to delve into the past that much, is there anything specific that you do to kind of keep all of your thoughts organized and make sure that you're not really contradicting anything in terms of chronology? Because I've done that before where I realized while I was editing like a later draft that I completely contradicted what I had said in terms of when something happened, and then had to go back and try to find every spot that it was mentioned to make sure that I could rectify it chronologically.
Yeah.
So like what do you do to kind of keep track of things with that?
Well, I think, well, the software I use is Scrivener. And what's nice about it is you could break your story into chapters and scenes, and you can write notes about, okay, this is what happens here. And so that part of it is very important. It does help in terms of keeping things on track and making sure that I'm not contradicting myself. But one of the most important things is to look at the logic of the story. Where is the story at that particular time? What are these characters doing? Rather than just thinking about it, like this one manuscript that I've been working on called Christina's Portrait, which hasn't been published yet, but it's the same thing where we have a story that happens in the past and then a story that happens in more recent times, and then the stories come together. And this is also in first person. And here things happen at specific dates. So I will put
Sorry, my dogs are
notes
going a
in.
little crazy.
That's okay.
But that's cool. Like I really appreciate you, giving like some advice, not only on the publishing that we talked about earlier, but just even just like writing skills like that, and just finding ways to kind of organize and to make sure that things make sense. So I
Yes.
think people could really learn a lot from that. And I also think that based on, do you hear this dog? He's crazy.
Oh no.
The
We have a
he
crazy dog too sometimes, but
yeah, I've got three of them.
she's
It's
been
like
very
it's
quiet.
like a
Yeah.
zoo in here. But
Yeah.
but yeah, so we actually I guess we are sort of low on time now. So I want to give everyone a chance just to let them know where they can find your books, if they want to check that out. I think anyone who really likes a character-driven novel and exploring the relationships between people, I think would be interested in basically every novel that you listed, and as well as the one that you haven't published yet. So where
Yeah.
can they find those?
Well, the first of all of my books are available on Amazon, and Amiga and the remainders are on Kindle Unlimited. So if you're subscribed to that, you'll be able to read those. They're also available on paperback or in paperback wherever books are sold. And if you're in Orange County, I do book events quite a bit. I'm actually going to be in one in Mission Viejo. This will probably be after your video comes out. It'll be on June 30th. And I also do with lots of other events around. So if you're in Southern California, you can come and see me. And the best way to find out everything about me and my books and read my writing is visit my website, which is MatthewArnoldStern.com, MatthewArnoldStern.com. And of course, the link's in the description. And also, you could find me on all the social media. I'm on Facebook, Threads, Instagram, TikTok. And yeah, I still have an account on Twitter. I'm not calling it X, but
I
my
know I've
handle on all
refused
those
to.
yeah, my handle on all of those places is MAS Writer. That's MASWRITER. And I look forward to meeting you online or in person.
Great. And that's awesome, by the way, that you do actual book events in person. Like in your area, because that must be really fun. So I would love to do that one day. But everyone, please check out Matthew's books. Find them exactly where he said. And as he said, look in the description. You'll see all of the links put there as well. And thank you so much, Matthew. I really appreciate you being here and just talking about everything with writing and publishing and all the things that I think that listeners and viewers would be interested in. So thanks again. And yeah, it was great. So thank you so much.
Thank you. It's been a pleasure talking with you.
Yeah, so everyone, if you would be interested in appearing on Rough Rider, please send me an email at roughrider@protonmail.com. I'm always slow to respond, so I apologize in advance. But if you're interested, please send me an email. And as always, thank you for watching. God bless you all.